As Oppo and Oppo spin-off OnePlus become more and more interchangeable, the conglomerate's current smartphone lineup has become harder to pick from. There are overlapping models, way too many options, and the lot has been rising in price in recent years. The Oppo Find X3 Neo is an upper mid-ranger with X flagship components and an otherwise pretty well-rounded spec sheet. But at £600, is it worth buying? Well, thanks to Vodafone for providing this model today. We're going to be looking at it compared to its contemporaries. Is it worth picking over the others? Let's find out. I'm going to get this said right at the start of the video. If you can buy a OnePlus 9, get that instead. It's pretty much better in almost every single area and costs the same, at least here in the UK. It might differ in different regions. And you're also getting, in my opinion, a nicer looking software skin, although that's more personal preference than anything. But what I'm going to do going forward is review the device as if the OnePlus 9 doesn't exist, and we'll get back to that at the end of the video. The Find X3 Neo is a pretty good looking smartphone. It's made of metal and glass, has thin bezels, a punch hole camera, and clicky buttons. Its top and bottom edges are flattened, which makes the profile look rather square. Kind of neat, I actually really like this layout. And the rear of this particular model has this soft touch, almost rubbery finish, which makes the phone feel fantastic outside of a case. Mix in the curved screen and you've got an aesthetically pleasing phone too. There's no IP rating, which is a shame, but you've got an otherwise really nice feeling smartphone. It feels very solid, well built. However, the one thing I did notice is the haptics. They're not great. They're not super mushy and the worst I've ever felt, but when you compare them to like a Pixel or an iPhone or a modern Samsung, it does feel like there's a corner that's been cut there. We should probably talk about that screen because on paper it's pretty average, but in practice it's brilliant, quite literally actually. It's a 6.55 inch 1080p 90Hz AMOLED, and that might sound pretty meh to you, but this thing gets really bright, which I took advantage of in our recent sunny spell here in the UK. Where my other devices couldn't keep up, the Neo thrived. Also, 90Hz is a nice balance between added perceived speed and battery life, both of which we'll talk about a little bit later. Some might not like the punch hole and the fact that it's not centered even, but I happen to quite like it and I much prefer it over sort of a motorized camera layout or a notch or a dewdrop notch or anything like that. It feels a lot more modern. Having it in the middle would have been nicer, but I can live with it being in the corner. I did say we'd get on to performance, and the X3 Neo is actually using last year's Snapdragon 865 processor, which is one of the higher end ones that you could get last year, and it's using that instead of sort of a Snapdragon 870 or an 888 or a 7 series chipset. And this might make a lot of sense financially because you're reusing older parts, and you're certainly not going to run into many performance issues. I mean, this thing, for me at least, ran absolutely flawlessly. Not a single piece of lag or any hangs or anything like that. It just felt buttery smooth, which is kind of to be expected of a chipset that's only 1 year old, and it was the top of the food chain back then anyway. If you're a gamer, not a problem. If you run social media apps all the time, not a problem. If you're constantly multitasking, not a problem. And there is one RAM and storage option, namely 12GB by 256GB, which is going to be way overkill for most people. I mean, that is a lot of storage and a lot of RAM, and it means that you're getting a lot of value for money because there isn't like a lower end SKU that starts at a base price. No, you are getting fantastic specs in only one model. And just a bit of a side note, who is using 256GB of storage? Let me know in the comments if you do, and please, if you do, tell me what you're using that for, because I barely touch over sort of 32GB. So I could probably get away with a 32GB phone right now because I keep a lot of stuff in the cloud like photos and videos, and I don't download a lot of apps or games. But is that different for you? Do you guys have lots of games already on your phone pre-installed? Maybe your internet connection isn't fast enough to rely on that, so you keep everything locally? I don't know, please do let me know in the comments. Battery life certainly wasn't a concern for me either, thanks to the sizable 4500 mAh battery, but also to my more limited usage. As I've said before, I tend to use my phone a lot less than the hardcore phone owners, and so I get 2 to 3 hours of screen on time max per day, but I also finish the day with half the battery left, so I can use it for 2 days at a time. Someone like my partner who uses the phone, 6 hours screen on time a day is going to get a day of battery life, charge it overnight, rinse and repeat. The charging is fast enough, and there's a big charger in the box as well, that you could top up during the day, but I don't think that's going to be an issue for a lot of people. ColorOS 11.1 on Android 11 is as good as you really need. It's got plenty of flexibility for adjusting game optimizations, it looks alright, and it's up to date. It's definitely not the best skin. I personally prefer One UI, and I know a lot of people prefer sort of Pixel Experience or maybe even ColorOS. I meant OxygenOS, sorry about that. But overall, I think it's pretty good. It's not a deal breaker. I don't think you shouldn't buy a smartphone with ColorOS because of ColorOS. It might not get the latest software updates as fast as you might like, but I think it's a pretty good balance between usable and flexibility, and the fact it does actually get software updates. Right. Camera time. This is my bread and butter now. I reviewed this setup with all the options on default bar the skin smoothing, which I turned all the way off, and the video, which I turned to Ultra HD. For some reason, every smartphone under the sun seems to leave it on full HD. I don't know. And for you spec heads, the array of sensors includes a 50 megapixel main, 16 megapixel ultra wide, 13 megapixel 2x telephoto, and a 5 megapixel depth sensor with a 32 megapixel selfie camera up front. Whilst it's definitely not the most balanced setup we've seen from Oppo, at this price point it is pretty well balanced, especially when you consider the rest of the specs. Samples came out looking pretty detailed with solid dynamic range and a colour profile that I don't mind. Sure, there's a lot of saturation in these photos, definitely more than in real life, but it's not offensively overdone, which in my mind is absolutely fine. You get plenty of modes to play with, and the quality is, to be expected, pretty good. It's a £600 phone, the quality should be pretty good. I think I'd personally go for a phone that captures colours a little bit more accurately, but I know many people who would be more than happy with this setup, thanks in part to the quality, but also the flexibility of the 3 focal lengths on the back, and a good selfie camera up front as well. As I said right at the start of the video, if you can, go and buy a OnePlus 9. It's basically better across the board and the one that I would recommend. However, you might be offered one of these on a contract upgrade for free, or you might just be able to get this one a lot cheaper than a OnePlus 9. Should you buy it then? Yeah, I don't think you're going to be disappointed with this phone. It's definitely not a chart topper, so don't think it's competing with sort of the Galaxy S20 or S21. Something like the iPhone 12 Pro Max, it's not going to compete with any of those, but it's more sort of the upper mid-range flagship killer sort of territory, and for that I think it does a really good job. But as an overall package, pretty good, and I want to thank Vodafone for sending it out for review, because without them I probably would have never even seen that. I probably wouldn't have known that this phone even existed without them sending it over, so props to them for sending it out. Please do check their links in the comment section, or not comment section, description. It'll give you links to their 5G plans and also where you can buy this smartphone on their website. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Please do leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new around here to never miss a video like this one. Check out all my social medias in the video description. I almost said the comment section again. And also big thanks to my patrons for being continually supportive. I've been Ryan Thomas, and I'll catch you later. Peace.